I don't know if you folks know it, but the Rumballs are here tonight. He's your new alternate and the alternate to the zoning. That's why. Champion Church Office Center, it's on the agenda. Oh, I'm sorry, Jay. Jeff Bull, 1052 South Main Street, Washington. Champion Church is on the agenda tonight. I thought this was already approved by the supervisors, but under conditions that were very specific and fit zoning. As all of you know, and even the Observer Reporter commented on, this township has been given different stories by those representing Champion, who have refused to even reveal that the one representing them was a brother to the other person who owns the company. I hope tonight actual answers are given and this township is told exactly what is going on with the property. I also want to make a few comments regarding the offices. I have no problem with it at all if that's what they're going to be. My concerns are those, like those of many residents and even members of different boards, have been regarding this project and what they are hearing from the members of the church. So I want to remind everyone of a few facts. According to the traffic study, they never gave them number of people anticipated to be there in a day. The traffic study stated that they took the square footage and did an estimate at what the most people would be there on any given day or at one time. It was under 50. With that said, I would hope that if they have more than a new traffic study be done to correct the number of vehicles using the property and operations stopped until it is completed. So if residents see hundreds of cars, according to the traffic study, this won't be used as offices. In emails from 2022, after they didn't come to the meetings where they were going to ask the church be allowed in a C3 zone, they were told by the manager and assistant manager that they could not have an event complex and events could not be held because they had to have at least 100 acres to have a convention center. I may be off on the exact wording, but the gist of the email was that they were not allowed to have events with large crowds, only office space. I think with the lack of information that this group is given and changed in public meetings, this be made clear. Those of us in the community have been told by many people that the members of the church are bragging about how this is going to be a church and a revival hall, which are not allowed under the zoning. Solicitor Makel made it very clear the night it was approved for office space at the township meeting, that was all they were allowed to have under the zoning. They went 5 times the parking that a traffic study said would be the max amount of traffic for the office space of this size. On the issue of commercial signage, I'm not sure exactly what we're talking about, but as a business person, I understand what you all want to do. When I was president of the Northeast Dealers Association, 2 or 3 times I had the opportunity to travel a lot of towns in the Northeast for meetings. I pull into a town and there weren't any signs. And I finally realized one day they're all on the ground. Then I realized one day why they were all on the ground. And I finally come to the conclusion, maybe that's not all bad. And there's a lot of light pollution from what we have. I mean, there was a picture taken. It used to hang out it was taken and it was hanging up at the old the liquor place in town. Sorry, I can't think of the name. About all the light pollution in South Strabane, and then it just got dark. Best Buy up in Bethel, everybody knows where it is. Worst location known to man. Okay. And I'm speaking on Judy because she has some family issues, urgent family business that she's been dealing with for a while. Her mother's been ill. But you know something? That was the highest performing store in the Pittsburgh region. She was there when it opened and part of the sales team. Where they wanted to put the Pete's up in the old Beaumont. I miss the Beaumont. They wanted to put signs up and that's a residential. And I just think that we have a green team to worry about yards and recycling, and we do a very good job of that, I think. I'm quite the proponent of recycling, but maybe need to work on light pollution too a little bit. Now, Fred, everything in this township was pretty darn good until we worked on a TIF. No, 20 some years ago.
Why do you want to bring that up in the 3 minutes to talk about it?
I'll
I'll tell you that.
I just
before you bring
couldn't
this
help
up.
myself.
The last time I was down there, they had hats on sale. So you take that home and tell your wife to wear that to remind you of all the good things that South Street made.
Thank you, Mr. Bull.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Right here, advertise for them.
Okay, moving on. The next item on the agenda is consideration of planning commission minutes from July 6th. And if everybody take a minute, take a look at them. I know we were just handed them. So take a minute, please, and take a look at the minutes from July 6th.
I have a question. I don't know whether Mr. Ziegler can answer it since he wasn't here. But, you know, the Floral Hill plan where they were missing the utilities of water and sewer lines, did those actually ever get put on the drawings, do you know? Because with John Mounts, sometimes that stuff doesn't happen. I mean, we have a meeting, we say that stuff's missing, but then we never get confirmation whether it was actually put on the drawings or not. I'd appreciate it. There's some confirmation on that. Yeah.
Okay, anybody else? Any corrections? Okay. We have a motion to accept the minutes. Do we have a second?
A second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, you can still vote. You just don't really have anything to say. Next item, consideration of Champion Center Enterprises LLC land use application to operate business offices at 65 Fisher Road in the C3 zoning district. Anybody here for the applicant?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. The board is well familiar. My name is Thomas Monich, and I'm an attorney licensed in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and the hearing office in the city of Washington. I'm here tonight on behalf of the applicant, representing the applicant seeking land use approval for the business professional offices, which have been approved as a conditional use in the C3 area. We have before you a set of drawings. This matter was first before the board and presented to the township and the engineer in February of this past year. The engineer provided comments to the applicant. In June of this past year, the applicant made changes to the drawings and attempted to submit those to the township. Drawings and application fees were not accepted at that time by the township. In July, they were again submitted to the township. And the township accepted the drawings along with the filing fee, which had been presented at the time of June, which was accepted in July. The provisions in July addressed the issues that the township engineer has raised in February of 2023. We were again on the agenda in September. That did not occur, so we are here again tonight seeking the approval. My understanding that from the time the township engineer submitted the comments in February of 2023, date a little after 7, we have not received any further comments by the engineer. So it's our position that it appears to be that the land use application is in order, and we would seek favorable recommendation.
Mr. Lynch, I have a letter in my packet dated September 5th, September 5th, 2023, from the engineer. Have you seen this letter?
We have not seen any. The applicant's engineer is present. When testified. Time. I work. Give him a minute or two to address that.
Yeah, take your time. I'll ask you this. I have a letter dated October 3rd from the Conservation District. Did you gentlemen receive that? Okay.
What's the date on this, Blake?
September 5th. It's not, doesn't say it went to you, I don't believe.
No.
It's copied to Mr. Horvath, KLH, and Jordan. Carbon copy. Oh, see, Scott is, Scott's not here. Okay,
So,
well, you've seen this.
so I spoke to Scott this morning, his opinion was that wasn't sure why you moved back into the law.
Okay,
Did anybody
But-
look at the drawings, the application was submitted in July?
My understanding is, well, we have a June 5th, 2023 set plan that was subject of this.
that's the subject of the, according to this letter, the June 5th plan.
It's that June 5th plan with permission you're referring to. That's what, which
So
still,
we submitted plans in June. July, August, September, 3 months later, the date that we were supposed to be here before the planning commission, that's when the township engineer submitted it from.
September. There was a hold on the, by the previous town manager. We were notified that the, we also approved it because there was actually land use appeal. There was a copy of the, where the,
I'm not gonna get into it with the chief of what I agreed to. I'll pull out the letters of what I didn't agree to. But regardless, we're here tonight. The engineer can take a look at these. and see if they- Just looking through these, I think, I mean, most of them are, but I think all of them have been very well, easily addressed prior to this meeting. If we received the letter. Over a month.
You know, typically what we see is, again, once the applicant responds to the letter and makes the changes they can make. I'm not gonna get into what's happened here or not, but just in general, what we're looking at tonight is I have this letter from the engineer. I have the planning commission's conservation district's letter. All we're doing is gonna review this like we review all of our land development applications, so. And I'll ask you what, I know you haven't had much chance to look at this. There's a lot listed here.
here's a lot of comments.
What was Mr. Stanich's reason for withholding the information on this?
Right, and we've maintained the position all along. It's a land use appeal, it took exception to 5 conditions, not challenged. So there was nothing to why this matter was actually solved. So we're here, and I don't know how long the board wants to be here, but what are the deficiencies that are pointed out? Because the engineer just indicates the application contains deficiencies. that need to be. So if you want to go through each one and tell us what the deficiency is, so maybe they can be addressed, it's coming out on the drawing. We're here and we're willing to do that.
Well, I will tell you, one of the questions the first question I'll have about is the conservation districts.
That is
Letter.
usually, no, but that is typically most townships, a condition that, like the contingency of approval presented to get permit, usually comes after we get through most municipalities, and it's a condition of the final approval. So that, I would say usually is not an item that will hold up something because it's the third party approval, something similar to maybe sewage planning or something along the line.
If you want to introduce yourself.
Oh, I'm sorry, yes, my name is Chris Ham with KDH. We try to confuse people by getting as close as we can.
Oh, there was M, there was, could use that.
But looking through a lot of these comments, like first floor elevation, floor plans and building. They can be provided, but they're really not land development issues. Majority of the last page is performance bonds, development agreements, evidence of cross easements and maintenance agreements for shared parking. We don't have it. Things along those lines that will take place after approval. Like I said, with performance bonds. Like I stated, I think if we would have received this letter prior to the meeting, we would choose to respond to all the. We haven't seen this letter.
Let me ask you a question here. I don't see it in here, but as far as the sewage flows and sewage discharge,
We are working with the,
'cause people have problems with WeJ with capacity and back and forth, especially in that drainage area.
we would have to go through a full planning module. We're working with WeJ to extend the sanitary sewer from road up to the site. It would be actually a main line up to the site. That would have a new line. No, we go from,
Down the Fisher Road. I mean, it just, where you're at, you're several thousand feet from the actual public sewer or something like that.
I believe we do have a letter that we do that allows that.
Like I said, it's a shame, other than that appeal, why these folks didn't get the letter. Because a lot of this is just house cleaning items, honestly. I don't see anything of a real technical hang-up.
Yeah, I don't either. The problem is, for us at this point, is that it's not what we do. We would ask that those be addressed and then we'd approve you. So we'll do what we normally do, and I understand if you don't want to accept that, but I will ask you that if you want to come back and address these, we'll table it. You have to extend the time period. If you're not willing to do that, I understand it, then and you want us to vote or, to move on, we can do that, but I would say I doubt the motion will be to recommend at this point, but I would rather have you come back and make it right, but yeah. No, I-
There's no fault of our own. And we continue to do this before the township. Additional use hearing, the matters that are before it, representations that are made and carried through by the supervisors. And now you're asking us to agree to something with no fault of my client, which will again cause delay by my clients and additional expense.
And I do understand your position, but my position here, as far as the board goes, that's what I'm gonna ask from you. And I understand it if that's rejected, and then we can continue on and a motion will be made on the application at this point. I understand your position.
I'm asking, let's go through this letter, at least a representative of the engineers here, to point out what the engineer or the township believes deficiencies in this application.
Well, we can do a couple of them. Is there a lighting plan included in the packet? A site
we're
lighting
currently
plan?
working on that.
Okay, well, that's not there and that's supposed to be there, Mr. Lonich. I can't help that.
I'm just, again, and we know about this before today.
I hear you. And I understand.
And, we know fault of our own.
That, the lighting plan requirement is in the documents.
It's in there.
No, it's not in here. I'm saying the requirement, if you have one, is not, it has existed prior to this. This letter just points out that you haven't provided. And so the requirement has always been there and it hasn't been provided.
Well, let me ask the board, between September 4th to tonight, has the board been asked to, during the month of September, to hold a special meeting on behalf of the applicant to address
No.
But I'd like the minutes to reflect that although we made a request for a special meeting, the board was never asked to hold a special meeting from the September planning commission, originally scheduled planning commission meeting until tonight's special.
We had no
Well-
meeting in September,
I understand that.
so
I'm just asking that
The reason, just so everybody understands, the reason this was not on September was because our township solicitor, who has been in communication with Mr. Long, said that they were not ready. So we've confirmed it multiple times. I don't know what communication occurred between the two attorneys. However, that's what we based our decision on.
I'm not trying to fix blame, I'm just making a statement. We had requested a special meeting be held. Once we learned that the September planning commission meeting had been canceled. All I asked was, between that time and tonight, was the board ever approached to holding a special meeting? You've answered.
You said no?
no,
I've asked that be made part of the minutes, but there has been no request made for a special meeting. That's all I'm asking.
Thank you, Mr. Lawrence.
Should it be noted also,
Well, you're not going to address this issue tonight. As respected members of the board, I'm not gonna ask you to, and I'm not gonna request that you be here for hours if you go through it. But I am going to make a specific request that if there are any other deficiencies or documents that pertain to this, that it be provided, so that when we're back here in November, you are in a position to address that, and we are in a position to address it.
And I would say what typically happens and what should happen here is you have this letter, the September 5th letter. You address what needs addressed in this letter, submit that within a reasonable time before the next meeting. And if there's deficiencies, they'll be communicated to you in the normal fashion that it's usually always done. That would be my expectation. If you're willing to extend the time and come back in November, that's the way I'd like to see it. So then, because I don't think any of these are large items either. They just have to be addressed before I could vote to recommend approval, because we just don't do that. We just don't move it and then hope for the best between now and then. And I can't change that now. I understand what you're telling us, the position that you're in.
And
But that's the position we're in.
I completely understand what you're saying, Mr. Chairman, and I understand the position of the board. But advocating on behalf of my client, we need to know what it is that the township needs or wants, so that it can be addressed.
Fair enough.
And as I said, and I'll provide whatever documentation this board or the township needs regarding any issues of meeting my letters, my emails, all of that. See, the chief manager here appears to be an email that has anything to do with us.
Well, I'll tell you, it's a June 19th email from you to Dennis.
Mr. Maple,
Yes,
he confirmed our conversation regarding the above.
yes. And then there's a June 21st letter from you to Dennis as well.
Again, I understand all of that is taking place. All of that is happening. That's what you were hearing.
And
Never
I,
happened.
Yeah.
I didn't make any accusations at all. Chief.
may I ask a question?
of course,
Um,
Want to read the letter, Mr. Steele?
I'm gonna let Paula to go first. That's
I would
okay.
say the appeal that's in court, are we even able to make a decision regarding this until that appeal is resolved?
My position is yes. The use has been approved. We took exception of 5 conditions that the supervisors placed upon that approved use. To date, it is my understanding, if not all five have been resolved, at least four have been resolved. The only issue may be, and we've maintained all along, that certain of these conditions that were placed by the township violated the municipality's planning code as well as the laws of the Commonwealth by attempting to require off-site improvements, specifically to Fisher Road, by the applicant's property owner. Now, in conversations that I've had, it's my understanding that at least four of those have been resolved. There was an amended findings of fact, conclusions of law and conditions that were accepted by the board or enacted by the Board of Supervisors on August 29th. That dealt with it. Said, my understanding, and I'm not sure because what I thought all of the matters have been resolved, but there apparently is still remains an issue as to whether there can be a requirement of a left-hand turn only from my client's property on the Fisher Road.
Of those conditions that were in question, do any of those results of those affect this land development?
That's my position.
Well, and the way we would have way we handle that, anytime there's a, say we did, just in general, that we put conditions on something and the supervisors kept them and then that was approved, we would look at the plan in regards to those conditions. I don't have any conditions in front of me here with this application. So to me, I'm reviewing this and I didn't see the engineer comment on them. So I would review, I would be recommending base our review on what the engineers reviewed and the land development ordinance. And then I would, but knowing that there are conditions, if I was to make a motion at some point, it would be subject to whatever we say and whatever the conditions were and make that motion. Then it's up to the supervisors from there.
And again, we're here tonight. So if those conditions were in fact had an impact upon this, then my argument is it's incumbent upon a representative township supervisors to be here and say, this condition is applicable and this is why, so we can address that.
Or we have it and we'd look at it too. If I had it, I'd be looking at it too. Or if Scott, if the engineer had looked at it, I'd be looking at
A
it
lot
too.
of times, the supervisors will put conditions on or take conditions away after we've reviewed it, and we never get to see what they were. We don't know whether they're harebrained or whether they're legitimate, but they're from the supervisors. We don't get a second bite at the apple. So I don't know what these 5 new conditions are, so I don't even know whether they were incorporated in. Whether, you know,
Over my years in the township, both representing and sitting in the same spot that you are, I will know how that occurs.
yeah,
I'm just raising that on behalf of my client.
this left turn, no left turn only. I know, is that a scientific reason, sight distance reason, or is this just because people don't want it to go to the people to the right? I mean,
Part of my argument.
It's a site.
Well, that's where that problem down on Fisher Mall.
And
Going
there
down
was-
there today, you have 1/10 of a mile. Like,
But there are procedures to do all that. I'm not saying you can't do it. I'm just saying you have to, procedures actually should be done.
But that does affect, you know what, now I'm remembering, that affected where this entrance was coming in because there's a sight distance concern that's coming over the knoll when it's coming from Manifold. And I think they had to move that, shift that entranceway down some because of that clearance.
It wasn't.
That's what I thought. And but then we're not having the complete information. That's what I'm thinking, like the conditions we're talking about that have been questioned. I know what you're saying, Mr. Wanich. Technically, from this point of view,
Tom, if you want to go down through these line item by line item,
I'm not gonna do that to the board. I have too much respect for the
Well,
board to make.
I'm just saying, we can only do so much here.
I think we've come to an understanding. Yeah.
I mean, it's the same, you're in the same position. You're saying, I don't know. And, you know, we've made those changes to the driveway because of a concern that was raised about the visibility and whether you make a left turn. But I think it's unfair, not this board, but it's unfair to say to me, my client, we'll answer these questions, but we're not going to take what the questions are. I just want the information, so we come in here and say, here it is.
Well, Tom, here it is. I mean, the
Now
September
we
fifth,
come back.
the September fifth letter has it.
Is this,
This
but they
is
never
it.
got it.
have that
Yeah.
now. So
Okay.
I'm, whatever Mr. Smith,
And-
you need me to indicate that we will agree to waive it.
You'll have to sign the, do you have the paper for them? Brandon always had the paper and signed that you would,
I'll send
because you have
a
to do that
letter-
in
I'll send a
writing.
letter tomorrow that we agree that anytime restrictions applicable to land.
wait 30 days or so that
We will continue over to the very end of November.
the November meeting. Okay. And I would say stay in communication with the engineer and we'll see how it goes.
And if you don't get it, contact the engineer.
I'm not gonna.
No,
I'm not
I mean,
gonna
that's-
promise that. That is
Yeah,
not-
yeah. No, that's-
No.
I think you,
Sorry.
and typically, I mean,
Everybody have the engine, I mean, you know that, yeah. I mean, Get that information. I know everybody has my phone number.
but yeah, I don't see why they can't. Typically, like I said, Scott will take a look at it and goes from there.
Any other
And then
questions?
we can-
Anything while we're here?
No, like I said, I didn't see any, yeah. To me, I think these are things that you'll be able to address and get the set, get them in the set, and I don't see any other problems with it. You seen anything, Fred?
No, like I said, it's mainly house cleaning items here.
I have one question, and I'm just gonna say something later, because this came up from discussions previously. The parking, when the supervisors approved that, did they put a condition regarding parking on it?
Initially, they did. They very clearly. The representation that it was made, a recommendation by the planning. That was one of the conditions. The Board of Supervisors amended that and removed the 200 space parking lot restriction and allowed it to be increased to 280, which is a part of the application.
May I ask why so many parking spaces?
Because that's permitted. Probably.
It does, yes, it gets
Because by,
conflicting information.
because the client feels that that's needed to provide the services and meets all the requirements of the minimum that are laid out in the township.
And what is the minimum in service?
Use has been approved, and so it's, and that's, I mean,
It's the
it's
business
allowed in
office.
it. So, all the other applicants, I won't say this, but the applicant meets all the township ordinances as far as the minimum number of uses for a business professional office.
Hey, office, good with that, please. Office, good.
The exact number isn't known yet, because it depends on the number of cases that could be.
I made potential.
I don't have that major formula with, if on it. Anything that question, please?
But just make sure if, that you,
Speculative, because my recollection is that you were trying to keep flexibility in that building depending on who your client was gonna be, whether they needed a big area for offices or, you know, they were coming in once a week and they just needed some small cubicles. So you wanted as much flexibility as possible with it.
Before it's broken down.
Yeah,
Meet the client.
right. And that's
Tenants.
fine.
and just understand, if your position is going to be on some of these that it's not required, I'm going to look at what our code says. If our code says it's required, it needs to be there. If you say that goes against something other than our code goes against something, that's a different argument. But if it's in our code, our land development code, and says this thing's supposed to be there, and if it's not there, that's gonna be a factor for me.
Yeah, but the fact,
That's
I
all.
think the discussion.
That's all I'm
I
saying,
think
yeah.
the discussion was, when this first came to us, because we have these huge damn parking lots and now we're into all this stormwater issue that we really don't need that much parking up there. And so, but the 280 was what was allowable, and so you were allowed to do 280. You know, the 200 was our desire to sort of cut down on runoff. But you know, you're entitled to 280, you have 280. I don't care whether you're making tacos in there or sending, doing international finance. So,
The concern though is the traffic on the road. And if you have 280 spaces and you think you're gonna fill them all, and you have all those people coming and going, that becomes a factor.
Well, the point, I think too, and that's all good discussion, but the point that we're at now is whatever conditions were placed on this by the supervisors, we will have that in front of us by the next meeting, and that should be something that's been reviewed. Done, if there's condition that says you can have 5 parking spaces, then that's what I'm looking at. If it says you can have, that's part of what's up there, so it'll move forward based on that, as far as I'm concerned.
Correct me if I'm wrong.
Speculating,
You know,
Sorry,
yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong,
just speculating about what's happening.
just so I'm clear. Come November,
It's on the state level.
when we meet again, it's not a conditional use application hearing, it's a
No.
discussion as to whether or not these bullet points have been addressed from a land use development plan perspective.
It'll
correct?
be this, yes,
Is that
does this comply with the
Yeah.
land development ordinance? That's it.
that's it.
So we should hang on to this packet for next month. I don't want you pulling more trees.
Well, he's gonna have to, that's the sad part. He's gonna have to submit other plans. Like, I will say, you don't, in fairness to me, you don't, I would be fine with you not submitting 8 copies, if that helps you
I
out.
request that in writing.
I mean, I don't need that.
Township ordinance states how many of them.
I mean, I'm willing to,
Whatever the ordinance says.
Yeah.
why don't you just do it to be safe anyway?
But
That's
this-
fine.
This letter from KLH comes off of these plans, correct? Is that?
Right, but then they revise the plans and submit, they have to submit to him again so he can review it again. Or respond to the letter. They can respond to the letter and, because some things are on here, like, there are things that they put on a letter, for an example, development agreement if required. They can respond and maybe a development agreement's not required and they can say development agreement's not required, whatever. That's kind of how. it
When
works.
when it's resubmitted, to answer, to respond to these items that are in the September 5th letter, and if necessary, anything from the county conservation district, then our engineer will review it and comment as to whether or not these have been adequately addressed. I think that that's pretty clear at this point. I don't think we need to, beat a dead horse anymore. It's,
We're good. We can just do a motion to table based on what we said. Oh, yes, sir.
You have a intention to provide 360 access around the building, is required,
They are.
okay, through paving? Okay. Doing,
Oh, it looked like, when I looked at the site plan.
So can anybody make a motion, or I will, can we make a motion to table till November, provided the written
What's the actual date?
waiver of the time till the meeting in November? You want the date?
Yeah.
I'll provide the township with a letter. Probably tomorrow. So we'll be waiting on the time.
You got the actual date? First Thursday. Second. That sound right, Chief? Will be the, our meeting will be the second, right? First Thursday? Okay. So the motion is to table the land development application until the next meeting on November 2nd. Do I have a second? All in favor? Aye. Motion carried. Okay, thank you, Mr. Lynch.
thank you, gentlemen. Okay, thank you. Thanks. I'll see everybody again. Take care.
Mr. and Mrs. Rumbaugh, but they're not on the agenda.
No, they're here. I think Jeff said that they're, alternates. Right? New alternates. Or Mr. Rumbaugh, new
Alternate for who?
It's usually not this big a deal. So. It's usually yeah,
Alternate for-
I'm sorry. I get, for us, yeah. We, another alternate for us?
Yes, yeah,
Okay.
they're still
Dawn's still there?
correct, yeah, apparently it was allowable by code. and they had requested, they had put an application to be an alternate, so
Okay.
the board.
Usually we can't get enough to fill the seats.
And I think that was kind of their
Yeah,
thought
That's
is
good.
if we have the application, let's do it.
yeah, you got somebody ready to go. Sounds good. Planning, you should see. Yeah, so if somebody isn't here, then they can jump in.
Yeah, and I'm wondering why.
Okay.
It's in secretive. Yeah.
Okay, next item we have is continued discussion on electric vehicle charging.
Oh, yeah. I know.
Chief, or the engineer have anything,
Who knows? All right, electric
Okay.
vehicles,
electric vehicle?
you have the floor, Chief.
All right, wonderful. So if you look at number 7 from the July meeting, essentially, I was just looking for an official motion in support of us moving forward with the process to make that a conditional approval. Obviously, you'll have further information on it when it passes. But once that's actually drafted, you would get the draft. But essentially what I'm looking for is to see if everyone's in support of that officially. We just
Supportive.
I do have one question with
Sure.
regard to that.
Yep.
As part of my continuing education, I just did a class on EV.
Sure.
Oh, boy. And the one thing that I did gather from it is the development of these charging stations and the technology of the charging stations is very dynamic
Mhm.
because of making the different stations usable by the different manufacturers, and they have the different.
Right.
Different.
Each
plugins.
plug is different,
Yeah, so they're
sure.
different. And I just, when you do go through that, I think that one thing that you would want to see is make sure that there's something that addresses the changing thing, the fact that it's going to be changing over the next several years at least, until there's something becomes standardized, because there is a big push for
Right. So
standardization.
the only thing that we were looking at with this is to establish a distance from the building, a distance from other vehicles, and an emergency shutoff so that we have access to it. This specific topic was not intended to go further than that. The electrical code should be addressing that, but as you likely know, Pennsylvania is always multiple years behind the most recent code. So we're still operating off of 2018. The next year's code model likely will address that, but we won't adopt that for who knows how many years. So our biggest thing, we don't believe that they catch fire more frequently. The issue is that when they do catch fire, they're extremely difficult to put out. So we don't want something that could burn for 90 minutes plus next to a commercial building. We want that to be away from the building. We don't want it to be right next to other vehicles. And then we want the ability to shut off power outside on a post rather than going inside and looking at, if you go into Walmart to Giant Eagle, the electrical panels span about 40 feet. So trying to figure out where all of our shutoffs are.
Right now, you got the guy who thought.
Yeah,
Back on.
right, right.
Because that's been the traffic jam up there. Traffic on the trail.
Sure.
People off the whole.
Yeah.
thing.
Yeah, you were mentioning that the one day.
I looked down, block the whole lane. And I probably wouldn't get too much mileage on access a whole big trail. 50,000
Get the
steps.
next Johnny Eagle charging station.
F-250.
Yeah, right.
Coming in electric. They're gonna do big crew cabs.
Yeah.
Will we address that?
Not in this. I would expect the new code reviews to have that addressed, but this one was just kind of, we're getting a lot of applications for them. And the longer we wait, the more that go in that could very well be right next to a building. Now we have I can send them a letter and basically request that from a public safety standpoint, can you move them over here? They theoretically could tell us to pound salt and
What will be done about the different types of, will it address the locations of the different types of charges with respect to each other in the building? In other words, whether it's a supercharger or
Right.
an overnight.
right. There's no indication of the information we have right now that would give me a good way to dictate that. My main concern, just total distance from building to charging ports.
So what do you need from us?
Just a motion that you're, willing to support that, and then we'll come back to you with a draft amendment.
Second. Beaches.
What's the motion?
He's gonna draft an ordinance.
Okay, well, you need to say that.
Oh.
Make a motion.
He said
make a
it,
motion
he
to
wrote
give
it
us a
down.
preliminary draft
He made
for
it.
the charging station ordinance.
Well, it's not gonna be the, I mean, they're gonna draft an ordinance and then we're gonna look at
You'll
it.
get the
So all he
opportunity to
needs
review
is,
it
they
before.
need the approval to take the time to do it, and expend the resources to do it. Yeah.
So, in addition to addressing proximity and those types of things, and one of the things that we've come up against recently, especially we've got like places like McDonald's coming in the morning, repurposing spots, is how are they classified? Are they just parking spots? Do they count as spots in the calculation? Or are they separate, like, when we're counting parking lots, spots? We never consider a handicap spot a spot. It's not, it's reserved for a special purpose. Are these spaces going to be removed from that overall parking? Number of parking? Yeah, are they separate? You're required to provide 200 parking spots.
Yeah,
If 5 of them are EVs, is that still 200 or is that 195 plus 5? EVs?
right.
Well,
That's
I
something that
think-
we need to clarify in what we're doing.
Partly like when the McDonald's a number of years ago now applied for two lanes instead of just one. Most of these fast food places, the Taco Bell, they all have more parking than they need because they're 80% takeout. So
Right. And that's,
I know
that's,
what you're saying, but I don't know.
that's kind of.
Yeah,
what
the
we're
only
looking at.
reason, to me, for that is if like a handicap spot is kind of special because you're not by law allowed to park there unless you're permitted to. An EV charging spot, I'll park my gas truck in that thing if I want to. Unless they prohibit me from doing that, I guess. So, I mean, if they prohibit you from using it, then maybe it should be
And that's one of
removed.
the
It probably should be
discussions we've
removed from the
had.
calculations.
Right.
Yeah,
They can throw a sign on it that says EV parking.
right, but like you're gonna get cited for it, yeah.
Right.
Right,
Yeah.
yeah. I park in the pregnant woman's, no, I don't.
All of that's because if we're gonna do that, like somewhere in there, clarify this is how we're gonna bring it.
Yeah, but one of the issues that came up, when we don't have this issue here, is parking garages where they
Right.
have the spots. And people would park there overnight and their cars are still there, they're fully charged, and they're still there
They're
all
still
day
there taking
long,
up the space.
taking up the space, even though they've been fully charged with an overnight charge.
Right.
So those are the kind of things that, like I said, we don't have an issue with parking garages.
No.
We
for us,
technically
it's
do
safety.
have,
I
so
mean, that's-
the Washington Hospital's
Oh,
parking
yeah,
garages are in South
yeah,
Bend.
yeah,
How,
the hospitals, you know,
they, hopefully they don't hear that. Hopefully they won't look at those anytime soon. Because that's another issue for us of then when that catches on fire, it is
Yeah.
just horrible. One of the videos we watched last month was one of them. Yeah.
Mhm.
Get some in front of us. So
we can talk
about it more.
Yep. Awesome.
Let me tell you, Joe, as a Department of Energy employee,
Stuff.
okay, we have a couple research projects going on. Number
We have
one,
signs
charging
next?
stations all the way down.
You ready?
Interstate 70.
We're gonna move on to signs
Can I
next.
just-
Can I just say? one
Do we
thing
need to-
about EV stuff?
Other things,
I have an EV,
Right.
the,
and there's a sheets in Virginia,
Mhm.
and the parking places that go up. the EV. There's a air pump here for your tires, and there's all the line.
Yeah. The block.
Think about that.
All right. Right.
That's for the engineers. That's not for the code though,
I
but
ever see
yeah.
your
but
truck
you
parked
can-
in- Yeah.
I've never done that, but I would if it was the only spot. All right. Chief, you wanna go to on the signage?
The sign requirements in South Strabane Township, they're filling up. They have so many sign requests because they feel that the code is fitted in what we require. They've made mention that
For variances,
yeah,
it's too restrictive.
very normal signs that you would see at posts. In South Strabane require variance, require additional costs and whatnot. So they want to do a review of that. They want to take public input from, one in the community, compile the data. And our solicitor for the zoning hearing board had provided suggestion that that's planning commission project, not zoning. So, the two options we were thinking of is maybe scheduling a workshop between planning and zoning. If you all are in support of that, or we pick the issue up with planning.
Because we've done the.
Well, they bring it in, they can bring it here. if they
Yeah,
want,
they're-
though. They can,
Right.
yeah.
So would the workshop be something that you all would be interested in?
I'm cool.
Yeah.
Okay, so what we will likely do is solicit feedback from the public. We'll put an online form out. We'll have some printed forms. We'll, give folks, probably a month, we'll announce at the next meeting, put it out on social media to submit, to solicit that feedback from everyone and then compile that data for you all to be able to look at jointly.
No, it's
Perfect.
one thing, chief, is this going to be with the order menu signs?
I knew you
too?
were gonna.
Because I have a little problem.
Yeah, I remember
with
that
that.
actually.
I told
Yeah.
Brandon straight out, when he didn't get the point, I had to hit him over the head with. it.
So-
Listen, I don't believe the township should be regulating a sign that you order hamburgers or cheeseburgers
Yeah.
or chicken nuggets with. Those restaurants know what they want, they know, and I don't think this township has any business regulating a menu board sign.
Right.
Other signs for the business itself, okay, but
From my
I will vote it down every time,
sure,
as long as I'm on the board. I've been
From
30
what I
years,
got
I've
from
voted
them,
30 times.
they're looking at, building signage, Highland signs. It does not seem that they were interested in that.
Okay.
So,
Brandon
Monument
was,
signs.
yes, right,
You see around.
Right. right.
Jay, do you remember the fiasco with the Dick's sign?
oh, yeah.
Because it's actually not attached to the building.
Oh, right.
It's not on the building, it's up to the building.
Right.
We went round and round with that, and things like that.
Sure.
Well, that sign that's on Route 19, that's been 25 years ago, where the steel building is there. They put that red advertising sign that was, you can see it from all the way down Davisville Road, We didn't agree to that kind of sign. That was, it was like Coney Island. What the hell? That was, we didn't even know they were gonna put up a sign like that. Remember that? And then when they turned that thing on, we're like, oh my God. Like red and white
Chief?
all the way down the road.
That it?
I think
Whenever it's done.
that's
All
all.
set? All right, we're adjourning after this, so go ahead, Mr. Bull, but briefly, please.
One thing that Mrs. Rumbaugh brought up, Paula brought up, and I just think it's fair, nothing against the church. One of our business, our fault. You just do the way it's supposed to be done. But this parking, you're right, are they gonna have to do another traffic study to say, we wanna have 200? If you're gonna have 280 spaces, if you wanna have 280 spaces, in all fairness, to everybody that lives on that road, they should have to have a survey done that supports it. That's only fair to the rest of it. We don't need another Berry Road.
That
Now's
was,
the chance to prevent it.
that was the thing, not to belabor the point, I know, but that was the thing that jumped out, because that's what the traffic study only had, I think, like 50 or
It was
so.
50, and that was based on the square footage, how many people would be in a square footage of the building. I read the whole packet, yeah. So,
So
I mean,
now is that up to the supervisors to request that traffic or?
It's part of it's one of the items on the
I
list
did
from the
not see-
engineers, the traffic study
did see
has to be
traffic.
submitted. I don't know if it was or was. I remember reviewing a traffic study
I did too. that's
way
why-
back when, but I don't know what was submitted or not this time, so.
And,
But it's one of the ones on the letter, so.
You did an excellent job, excellent
thank you,
job
Mr. Lee.
of being fair and honest with them, the whole board did. You tried your best to play the game straight, but you know something? There's a little rule in life. If you're not getting an answer, ask for one. They could have reached out, the transition went through, the township went through transition.
Yeah.
They knew that. They could have done their best to help Gordon and Mr. Jeff through all this.
I have the utmost confidence that we'll flow through on the normal process of how things go, so I'm confident in that.
I see the other stuff there, I don't get involved with talking about with my trust fund.
Yeah.
If they done through it. Preparation of this meeting, I fully read the both letters that I have, the June letter, the December letter. I started reading the December letter and literally thought I had the same letter twice.
Yeah.
Because if you look at the two letters instead of side by side, they're very similar. There's a lot of things that they can complete this review, they just flat out didn't.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Well,
You don't even
look,
say anything at all. You guys did
Yeah,
everything.
we see this,
Background.
we see this all the time. And that's the thing too, we want to be careful. What's in front of us is the land development. I don't care about anything else up to that point. And then that's, but like I said, that can be between them, council, solicitor, and the supervisors. For us, we want to get down to the nuts and bolts and go and move on. And I don't want to spend a lot of time with that. And I don't like us commenting on that stuff either. I want to kind of just, let's focus on what we have. I was happy that they agreed to the time and then come back, so it can be a normal process. Because otherwise, we would have just shipped it up to the supervisors, and then that's not going to get anybody anywhere. But the use issue, and everybody has that, look, as far as that issue's done for me, and I've said it from the beginning. If some use goes in there that's not permitted, that's an enforcement issue. You tell me you're going to put an office, you show me plans for an office that meet, I'm going to vote to approve the plan. And then if something else happens, that's an enforcement issue at that point. I mean, I can't, there's nothing for me to do at that point. So, and they, as much as anybody, has every right to put in something that complies with the ordinance. People may have suspicions, but that's what enforcement's for. You can't, I follow the law. That's what we do, so, and that's part of it. Yeah.
Regarding that impact study.
Yes, did you see it?
I saw the statement on there. Any land development that proposes 75 or more additional trips during the adjacent roadways peak hours. The traffic impact study that complies with the requirements of Code 206-20. So,
It's 37.5 trips in and 37.5 trips out.
and it's 280 parking spaces.
Right.
So what are they going by to determine those trips? When I see those parking spaces, as and I'm no engineer, so I am, but just my own thought process. I see the 280, I'm like, okay, how many trips are you coming out of there? You
But
know,
that's also an
There's a
enforcement issue in a
disconnect.
sense
The problem
too.
is in the
It's
ordinance,
not.
There's a disconnect between the amount of parking spaces and the trip generation.
Yeah.
There's a
true, okay.
disconnect there, and that's the problem. That's our problem. That's not their
Yeah,
fault.
that's
Right.
No, but what, I'm asking this only because when they come back, do we need to expect a new traffic impact study because of that? Like, based on what they're presenting, that's my take on this, and I just kind of would like to know.
I don't disagree with you.
But I
It's
don't,
gonna be, they're gonna have an expert who's going to say.
That's no problem.
Aren't going to occur during.
Well, but if it's a business office.
I'm not arguing.
Yeah,
I'm
no,
not
well-
arguing your logic at all.
and
No,
I'm trying to think
I
how
was
to-
gonna.
but it's also the same thing of like I said, it's all still an enforcement issue in a sense too. If they're exceeding those, they're exceeding what they were permitted to do, and that's
Those
an
traffic
enforcement issue
counts,
too.
and I
If
didn't want to
that
interrupt
happens,
Paula because she was on a roll, but
It's also an
there's a hell
average.
of a lot of those traffic studies aren't worth the powder to blow them up. You know, they'll say this and there's no problem, there's no problem. I mean, keep adding cars and there's still no problem, you know, so I never am a real fan of how they're generated and the assumptions they make. And not all 280 spaces are going to be there filled at one time.
But you
I
also
think,
know,
ever.
tell me that,
You
you also
make
know
it
a
for a
traffic
wedding.
study done on that road is going to allow enough trips to fill up a 280
Yeah,
spot parking lot anyway.
It's right.
It
It's
doesn't
gonna allow
matter.
it.
Now, see, I live on that road. So
Yeah,
I have a
but
personal
traffic
stake
engineer
in it.
report's gonna say
I know
that
it
that's
doesn't matter.
fine.
No, that doesn't, but
Zip it
Yeah.
all, zip it.
I mean,
So-
just knowing the traffic that comes off of
Same thought.
19 and on Manifold and the concern through that, that's where our responsibility comes in to try to make
The
safety
general-
wise to that. But I feel like our hands are tied to a degree. I just don't like.
That's right, because there's not a connection between the amount of parking spaces and the trip generation. There's no connection whatsoever there in the ordinance.
Okay, well, we've given it an hour. We good?
I'll make a
All right.
motion to adjourn.
No.
All right, so moved. Thank you very much.